Have you ever woken up one morning and felt quieter inside? Not sad, not lonely, just still. You brew your tea, listen to the hum of the world outside your window, and for a moment, just a moment, you wonder if it's okay to feel this way, to feel content in your own company, to not reach for the phone, to not feel the need to be anywhere or with anyone. If this sounds familiar, then perhaps these words are meant for you. Because today we're going to talk about something tender, something many feel but few speak about aloud. The quiet truth that after 70, you may not need friends in the same way you once did. And that, my dear friend, is not a sign of fading. It's a sign of arriving. You see, we spend so much of our lives reaching out, trying to belong, to be heard, to be held by the people around us. From our earliest years, we're taught that friendship is the key to happiness, that to be surrounded is to be secure, that to be alone is to be forgotten. But somewhere along the journey, especially after 70, the heart begins to whisper a new truth. Maybe the greatest companionship you'll ever know is the one you build with yourself. Let's be clear, this isn't a rejection of connection. This isn't bitterness. This isn't resignation. This is a soft awakening. It's the realization that not all ties must be tightened, that not all relationships must be maintained, that sometimes letting go is not a loss, but a return. Because the older we grow, the more sacred our time becomes, the more selective our energy must be, and the more we begin to see that freedom can feel just as warm as closeness, maybe even warmer. But I know, this topic touches something deep. We live in a world that glorifies staying social, keeping busy, not fading away. And for many, the thought of stepping back from friendships feels like a kind of disappearing. But here's what I want you to know. You're not disappearing. You are distilling. You are gathering your energy closer to the center of who you are. You're no longer scattering yourself to be understood by others. You are choosing, finally, to understand yourself. And that shift, it's not selfish. It's sacred. If you've ever felt guilt for not calling back, or pressure to attend that lunch you don't enjoy, or sadness for friendships that faded and never returned, breathe, because maybe, just maybe, you are not meant to carry all those ties into this chapter. Maybe the season of life is not about expanding, but refining. Not about keeping up, but slowing down. Not about being seen, but finally seeing yourself. There's a quiet revolution that happens when you cross the threshold of 70. You begin to crave simplicity, stillness, truth. You begin to hear your own voice again, not drowned out by the noise of others' needs or the pull of old obligations. And in that space, you may discover something remarkable, that you no longer need a crowd to feel whole. You no longer need to be invited, included, or approved of. You no longer need to explain why you're choosing peace over plans. You're not isolating yourself. You're honoring yourself. And that is wisdom. So today, I invite you to explore this idea with me, with openness, with curiosity, and with the gentle awareness that your life, at this stage, is yours to shape. You may find that the things you once feared, silence, solitude, stillness, have become your greatest comforts. You may find that the more you let go of what no longer fits, the more room you make for what truly nourishes. And you may find that not needing friends in the old way doesn't make your life smaller, it makes it deeper. In this video, we'll explore 6 reasons why stepping into independence after 70 can be one of the most freeing, fulfilling choices you'll ever make. This isn't about building walls. It's about opening doors to yourself, your peace, your truth. So take a deep breath, settle in, and if you've been carrying the quiet question, is it okay to just be with me? Let these next few moments answer you with a soft and resounding yes. Because after all you've lived through, you deserve this peace. Let's begin. Reason 1. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt like you had to impress someone? Maybe it was years ago, a work colleague, a neighbor, even a friend. That little voice inside that said, be agreeable, fit in, don't be forgotten. You smiled. You nodded. You did your part to belong. But here's the gentle truth. You don't have to do that anymore. Not now. Not ever again. After 70, something sacred happens. The masks begin to fall. The performances lose their charm. And in their place, a quiet confidence begins to rise. Not loud, not boastful, just steady and deeply yours. You see, so much of life, especially in our earlier decades, is spent proving. We try to prove that we're good enough, smart enough, kind enough. We chase approval like children chase kites, always hoping to catch it, even as the wind shifts. Friendships in those years often come with strings, hidden expectations, unspoken rules. We show up not always because we want to, but because we fear what it would mean if we didn't. Will they still think of me? Will I still matter? But now you're past that. You've lived. You've loved. You've made your mistakes and your miracles. You've walked through joy and through grief. You've held others and you've learned to hold yourself. So what's left to prove? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's immense beauty in this stage of life. The shedding of the need to be someone in others' eyes, because you've already become someone in your own. Let me tell you about Harold. Harold is 73. He spent most of his life climbing ladders, corporate ones, social ones, even emotional ones. He hosted dinner parties not because he enjoyed them, but because they kept him in the loop. He called old friends because he thought he had to. He showed up, even when he wanted to stay home and sit with a book. But after retirement, something shifted. The calls became less frequent. The invitations stopped. At first, he felt invisible, forgotten. But then, one afternoon, sitting in his favorite chair with sunlight on his face, a thought came to him. I don't miss them. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss having to explain myself. And in that moment, Harold met someone he hadn't truly met in years. Himself. He began to spend time with his own thoughts, his old hobbies, his slow mornings. And the more he lived for himself, the less he needed to be seen by others to feel valid. Because here's the quiet truth. Validation that comes from outside is always temporary. But the kind that grows from within, that's what we call peace. So many people in their later years feel guilt for letting go of old friendships, for not keeping up with every phone call, every birthday, every gathering. But let me offer you something softer than guilt, something truer. Permission. Permission to step back. Permission to stop performing. Permission to no longer stretch yourself to fit into someone else's frame. The truth is, not every friendship is meant to last forever. Some served a season. Some taught you lessons. Some are beautiful for a time and then gently faded. And that's okay. Your value doesn't decrease just because your calendar is emptier. Your worth is not measured by how many people surround you. If anything, this stage of life is asking something else of you entirely. Not to expand outward, but to deepen inward. To sit with yourself and say, I'm still here. I'm still enough. Even, especially when no one else is watching. You are not a role to be performed. You are not a version of yourself designed to please others. You are real. You are whole. And you're finally free from the illusion that you must keep proving that to anyone. If you feel a shift in your heart as you hear this, that's not an accident. It's recognition. It's your spirit saying, yes, I've been waiting for you to see this. So today, take a breath and release the weight of needing to be understood, liked, admired, or praised. You have nothing left to prove. You are allowed to choose stillness over striving. And if some friendships fall away in the process, that's not abandonment. That's alignment. You've grown and your soul knows it. So next time you wonder whether to call, to explain, to try, ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear of being forgotten? And if it's fear, bless it, release it, and come home to yourself. Because at 70 and beyond, you are no longer a seeker of approval. You are the keeper of your own peace. And that is more than enough. Reason 2, peace becomes more valuable than socializing. Have you noticed it lately? That the sound of silence has become sweeter than the sound of voices? That a quiet afternoon alone feels more nourishing than a room full of people and passing conversations? If so, you're not becoming distant. You are becoming clear. Because after a certain age, usually somewhere beyond 70, peace begins to outshine performance. In our younger years, socializing was a lifeline. Laughter, gatherings, long nights filled with stories and song. They gave life color, and they serve a purpose. But now, something inside you is changing. You no longer seek to be surrounded. You long to be settled. And this shift, though gentle, is powerful. You begin to realize that stillness is not empty. It is full of presence. That you can feel more alive watching birds at the window than listening to voices that no longer resonate. Let me tell you about Margaret. She's 75, retired, and once had a calendar filled with lunch dates, bridge clubs, holiday gatherings. For decades, she was the social glue in her group, organizing, calling, hosting. She always had somewhere to be, someone to entertain, someone to catch up with. But something changed, not suddenly, but slowly. She began to notice that many conversations were stuck in loops, retelling the same complaints, recycling the same gossip, holding space not for connection, but for distraction. And one afternoon, during yet another phone call that left her feeling drained instead of uplifted, Margaret put down the phone, looked out her window, and whispered to herself, "I miss the sound of nothing." And so, she began a quiet experiment. She started saying no, gently but firmly. No to outings she didn't look forward to. No to conversations that felt like obligation. No to the idea that her value came from how social she appeared. And what she discovered was not loneliness, but relief. Without the clutter of constant conversation, she began to hear herself again. She walked more. She read more. She spent mornings in silence, sipping tea, watching the sun pour through the curtains like honey. And in that silence, she found peace, the kind no gathering ever gave her. You see, society often tells us, stay social or you'll fade away. But the truth is, not all noise is connection. Sometimes what we call socializing is just a distraction from being with ourselves. And there comes a point, often after 70, when your soul whispers, I'd rather be quiet than be drained. This is not bitterness. This is discernment. You start to recognize the difference between talking and being heard, being with people and being understood, company and connection. And when much of what once felt like friendship no longer brings depth, you stop chasing it. That's not giving up. That's coming home. If you've ever turned down an invitation and felt guilty, if you've chosen solitude over social events and wondered if something was wrong with you, let me assure you, nothing is wrong. You are healing. You are honoring your own rhythm. And here's the quiet secret. The older you get, the more precious your energy becomes. And you begin to see that not every conversation deserves a reply. Not every friendship deserves renewal. Not every silence must be filled. Because peace is not the absence of life. It is the presence of yourself. Imagine your inner world like a garden. In your younger years, you filled it with everything. Bright flowers, loud birds, open gates. But now, you've learned to prune, to quiet the garden, to close the gate to things that trample through without care. And in doing so, the flowers grow stronger. That's what happens when you choose peace. You become rooted, whole. You no longer live for the next gathering, the next call, the next interaction. You live here in the now, and the now is finally enough. So if you find yourself enjoying silence more than small talk, if you'd rather sit by the window than be surrounded by chatter, if your days feel better when they're quiet, let that be okay. Let that be sacred. You are not fading away from life. You are turning inward to where life truly is, to where the mind rests, to where the heart breathes, to where the soul remembers who you are without anyone else's noise. After 70, peace isn't just valuable, it's vital. It is your inheritance, your reward, your right. And when you choose it, without guilt, without apology, you give yourself back something that social circles can't offer. Wholeness. So the next time you wonder if you should attend that gathering or return that call that doesn't feel quite right, ask yourself gently, does this bring me peace or just keep me busy? And if the answer is peace, then you've already chosen well. Because, my dear, peace is not what happens when life is quiet. Peace is what happens when you become quiet and still feel whole. Reason 3. Fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. Have you ever reached out to someone and heard nothing back? You stared at the phone, waiting for a reply that never came. You remembered their birthday. They forgot yours. You checked in, listened, gave your heart, and in return, silence. If that's ever happened to you, please know it's not your fault. It's life gently teaching you something most of us only understand with age. Not everyone you call a friend is meant to stay. You see, when we're young, friendship is built like a house on sand. Fast, fun, full of laughter and shared adventures. But over time, the tides come. People change, priorities shift, and many of those houses, they wash away. At first, it hurts. You wonder what you did wrong. You ask yourself if you should try harder, call more, apologize, chase. But something remarkable happens after 70. You stop running after what doesn't run toward you. And in that stillness, you begin to see clearly. Not every friendship is built to last. Some were companions for a chapter, not the whole book. Let me tell you about William. He's 78 now, a gentle, thoughtful man who once had a wide circle of friends. Birthdays, holidays, weekly dinners. His life was full of faces and familiar voices. But then life happened. One moved away. One got busy with grandchildren. One stopped calling without reason. And one, the one he trusted most, simply disappeared when William got sick. At first, William was crushed. He blamed himself. He reread old messages, wondering what went wrong. But then one morning, sipping coffee alone on his porch, he realized something simple and life-changing. Maybe I didn't lose friends. Maybe I lost people who were never really there to begin with. That moment didn't make the sadness vanish, but it helped him breathe easier. Because the truth is, not all friendships are reciprocal, and not all friendships are rooted in love. Some are built on convenience, proximity, the illusion of connection. And when life changes, those threads snap. It's painful, yes, but it's also freeing, because fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. When you're no longer trying to keep up with everyone, you stop setting yourself up to be let down. You stop wondering why you weren't invited, why they didn't check in, why they forgot. Because now, your energy is sacred, and you've learned at last, it's better to walk alone in truth than be surrounded by people who only show up in fair weather. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It means you choose depth over density. One meaningful connection, a sibling, a lifelong friend, or even your pet, can be more fulfilling than a dozen acquaintances who only remember you when they need something. And sometimes that connection is simply with yourself. You sit at your table, a warm drink in hand, watching the trees sway outside. You don't need anyone to fill the silence, because the silence is finally kind. You've stopped hoping certain people will come around. You stopped expecting old friends to become new people. And that is the kind of peace that only wisdom brings. Let's be honest. Even good friendships carry expectations. You're expected to respond, to show up, to remember things. And when you can't or don't, the weight of guilt appears. But what if you didn't have to carry that weight anymore? What if letting go of those old ties isn't a step away from love, but a step towards self-love? Because the truth is, my dear, you do not need to be everything to everyone anymore. And you never did. So if someone stopped calling, bless them and let them go. If someone disappointed you over and over, release the resentment. It's too heavy to carry now. If you've been holding on to a friendship only out of habit, ask yourself gently, is this growing me or draining me? At this age, you're not required to maintain what no longer feeds your spirit. You've earned the right to choose peace over performance. So cherish the few who are still there. The ones who show up not out of duty, but from the quiet place in their heart that says, you matter. And if you find yourself with just one or two people like that, or even none for now, that's okay. Because sometimes the most important friend is the one who's been with you all along. You, let go of the disappointment. Let go of the expectation. Let go of the need to keep explaining your worth. You are not hard to love. You're just no longer willing to beg for it. And that is strength. Fewer friendships, fewer wounds, fewer tears over those who left. More time for joy, more room for peace, more space to breathe. So today, if you're still grieving friendships that faded, know this. It's not the end of connection. It's the beginning of something more honest. You've trimmed the branches, so your roots can grow deeper. Reason 4. Your time becomes more precious. There is a quiet moment that comes in life. When you look at the clock, not with urgency, but with reverence. Not because you're rushing anywhere, but because you finally understand. Time is no longer something to spend. It's something to treasure. You feel it in your bones now. The value of a morning breeze, the weight of a single peaceful hour, the sacredness of a day with nothing planned. And once you reach this age, 70 and beyond, something inside of you awakens. You no longer want to give your time away like loose change in your pocket. Because this chapter is not about filling space. It's about filling meaning. In your younger years, time felt endless. You'd give it away to anyone, anything. Phone calls that went nowhere. Gatherings that drained you. People who only took, never gave. Back then, it was easy to say yes. Yes to everyone else. And later to yourself. But now, later has become now. And yes has to be earned. Let me tell you about Richard. He's 81, a retired teacher with a sharp wit and kind eyes. He once filled his days with events, meetings, errands. His calendar was full. But his heart? Often tired. He thought being busy meant being valued. That staying social meant staying alive. Until one day, he sat at a noisy lunch with old acquaintances. Voices overlapping. Complaints flying. Stories told not for connection, but out of habit. And in the middle of it, Richard looked around and thought, what am I doing here? Why am I spending this hour, this precious hour, listening to noise that leaves me empty? He didn't finish his dessert. He walked home quietly, and when he got there, he turned off his phone. He made himself tea. He sat by the window, watched the leaves fall, and whispered, This is what I want my time to feel like. And from that day forward, Richard began to live differently. He no longer said yes to everything. He no longer kept up friendships that felt like obligations. He stopped picking up calls that always left him more tired than before. Instead, he asked a new question each time a request came his way. Is this how I want to spend my time? That simple question changed his life. Because after 70, time is not a thing to kill. It is not a slot to fill. It is life itself. Every hour you give is a gift. And not everyone, not every conversation, not every commitment is worthy of that gift. You begin to see how expensive your presence really is. And you start investing it where it blooms, not where it wilts. The truth is friendships take time. Calls, visits, check-ins, favors, birthday reminders. And some are worth every moment. But others? Some are leftovers from old versions of yourself. Friendships you keep not because they bring you joy, but because you've always kept them. And now perhaps it's time to ask, am I continuing this because I want to, or because I'm afraid of what letting go would say about me? Because the truth is, your time is no longer about them. It's about you. Time for long walks without needing to check your phone. Time to nap in the afternoon sun without apology. Time to read what you want, eat when you want, sit in silence without interruption. You've earned that. You don't owe your time to anyone anymore. Not to guilt, not to habit, not even to expectations. You get to choose. And that choice is power. It's not selfish. It's sacred. And here's something else. When you begin to honor your time like this, you also begin to see who truly honors you. The people who love you won't resent your boundaries. They won't guilt you into giving them hours you don't have. They will understand, and they will meet you in the places that feel light. So if you've ever felt guilty for saying no to an invitation, or for skipping a conversation that doesn't lift you, let that guilt melt away. Because every no to something that drains you is a yes to something that fills you. And your time, this day, this hour, this breath, is worth filling with peace, with joy, with you. Imagine your life like a book. The early chapters were fast, full of characters, plot twists, movement. But now you are in the final chapters, and you want each sentence to matter. You want quiet poetry, not noisy paragraphs. You don't want to rush anymore. You want to savor, and that is a beautiful thing. So the next time someone asks for your time, not just your presence, but your precious minutes, pause and ask, does this add to my life or take from it? Because after 70, you are not here to entertain. You are here to be at peace. And the more you honor your time, the more your life becomes exactly what it's meant to be, yours. Reason 5. True companionship comes from within. Let me ask you something soft and sincere. When was the last time you truly enjoyed your own company? Not just tolerated it, not distracted yourself from it, but truly, gently, sat with yourself without needing anyone else in the room? If it's been a while, that's okay. Because the world rarely teaches us how to be alone without feeling lonely. It teaches us how to socialize, how to perform, how to be seen, but not how to simply be. And yet, after 70, a quiet wisdom begins to stir inside you. A gentle, golden truth. The greatest friendship you'll ever have is the one you build with yourself. You've likely spent most of your life pouring into others. Loving children, partners, friends. Showing up when you were tired. Listening when no one asked how you were doing. Making sacrifices, big and small, because that's who you are. But now is the time to come back home. Home to yourself. You see, companionship is often misunderstood. We think it means company, a seat filled, a voice heard, a presence beside us. But real companionship isn't about who walks beside you. It's about whether you feel whole when no one does. Let me tell you about Eleanor. She's 76. For most of her life, she filled every hour. Morning phone calls, afternoon lunches, Sunday visits. Her calendar looked full, and so did her life. But beneath it all, Eleanor often felt tired, drained, misunderstood, like she had to wear a version of herself in every room she entered. And then, one spring, her closest friend moved away. Another fell ill. Another simply faded. The house grew quieter, and at first so did she. But slowly, something unexpected happened. One morning, Eleanor took her tea to the porch. No phone, no plans, just the soft breeze and the birdsong. And in that stillness, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because someone was with her, but because she was finally with herself. She started walking alone in the mornings, noticing the flowers blooming one by one. She began writing little reflections in a notebook, thoughts she never had time to hear before. She cooked for herself with intention, set the table for one, lit a candle anyway. She didn't wait to be invited. She invited herself into her own life. And in doing so, Eleanor discovered something beautiful. She wasn't lonely. She was finally accompanied by the woman she had neglected for years. Herself. That's the secret no one tells you. When you stop chasing people, you start meeting yourself. And when you meet yourself, really meet yourself, you find a kind of love that doesn't ask, doesn't leave, doesn't disappoint. You begin to enjoy your own laughter. Find meaning in your own silence. You become your own companion. And suddenly, the need to be constantly surrounded dissolves. Of course, connections still matter, but they stop being a lifeline and become a choice. You no longer fear being alone, because you now know you are not empty. You are full of stories, tenderness, wisdom, wonder. You are not waiting for someone to complete you, because you're already whole. It's funny, isn't it? We spend our younger years thinking love must come from the outside. But in our later years, we discover that the love we were searching for was sitting inside us all along. And here's the miracle. When you find companionship in your own company, you begin to attract people who meet you there. Not people who need you to entertain them. Not people who drain you with their chaos. But people who understand that quiet can be sacred, and that being alone is not the same as being lonely. So if you've ever felt a tinge of sadness when the phone doesn't ring, or when a weekend passes without plans, let this be a new thought. Maybe this moment is not empty. Maybe it's an invitation to know yourself, to enjoy yourself, to befriend yourself. Set a place at the table just for you. Go on that walk because it brings you joy. Play your favorite music just to hear your heart hum along. You don't need to be surrounded to feel loved. You just need to be present, truly present, with the person who's never left your side. You. So tonight, when the house is still and the world feels far away. Place your hand over your heart, close your eyes, and whisper, "I'm here, and I'm enough." Because true companionship, it doesn't begin in someone else's presence. It begins in your own. Reason 6. Letting go opens the door to a more fulfilling life. There is a moment, soft and slow, when you realize that holding on is costing more than letting go. Not just time, but energy, peace, joy. You sit quietly one morning, maybe with a cup of tea in hand, and ask yourself, why am I still clinging to this? This friend you haven't heard from in months. This social obligation that no longer feels like home. This version of life that once fit, but now feels tight in the soul. And in that moment, something inside you shifts. Because after 70, letting go is no longer about loss. It's about space. Space for yourself. Space for joy. Space for what truly matters now. Let me tell you about James. He's 79, quiet, thoughtful, a widower with a calm presence. For years, he thought staying busy with friends would protect him from loneliness. He kept up the invitations, hosted card nights, attended birthday lunches. But over time, those friendships began to feel like chores. Conversations were shallow. The laughter felt forced. The connection had become a memory, not a reality. Still, he held on, because letting go felt like giving up. And like many of us, he feared that if he stepped away, he'd disappear. Until one evening, sitting in a crowded restaurant full of familiar faces and empty words, James caught himself staring out the window. He wasn't listening. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't present. And in that moment, he knew, I don't belong here anymore. That night, he walked home through the quiet streets and felt something strange. Not sadness, not guilt, but relief. A door in his heart had quietly opened, and behind it was a life waiting to begin again. You see, letting go of friendships, especially those that once meant something, is not betrayal. It is an act of love. Love for your present self. Love for the life you're still building, even now. Because not every connection is meant to last forever. Some are seasons. Some are bridges. Some are beautiful chapters that were never meant to be the whole story. And when you let them go with grace, instead of guilt, you make room for something new. Here's what most people don't realize. When you stop giving energy to what no longer feeds you, you begin to bloom in ways you forgot were possible. You start saying yes to mornings without noise, to long walks without small talk, to simple pleasures that fill you up, not wear you down. You open yourself to new experiences, not because you're chasing excitement, but because your spirit is finally free to choose again. And sometimes, you find new connections in unexpected places. A stranger at the library who shares your love of history. A neighbor you always smiled at but never really spoke to. A quiet friendship with yourself that grows stronger each day. That is the secret. Letting go isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the clearing of the garden. The pruning of what no longer bears fruit. So the sun can reach the parts of you that haven't bloomed in years. If you've been carrying the weight of old friendships, ones that don't call, don't see you, don't lift you, you're allowed to put them down. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with the softest of goodbyes. Thank you for the memories, but I no longer need to carry this into who I'm becoming. Because who you're becoming still matters. Even now, especially now, you're not a story that has ended. You are a life that continues to unfold, gently, quietly, truthfully. And this chapter, this one is yours to write without needing permission from the past. So if you feel the tug to release something, a connection that's gone quiet, a group that no longer reflects who you are, trust that tug. Letting go isn't closing the book. It's turning the page. You don't need to fill your days with people to prove you are alive. You are alive, in your breath, in your stillness, in your presence. Letting go isn't loneliness. It's liberation. It's choosing depth over density, stillness over social noise, joy over obligation. It's looking at your own reflection and whispering, I don't need to hold on to what no longer holds me, because the life that awaits you after release is lighter, taller, and more peaceful than you ever imagined. So exhale, let go, and walk through the open door. because sometimes the most fulfilling life is the one you finally give yourself permission to live. If you're still here, still listening, still holding these words in your heart, then perhaps this message found you for a reason. Perhaps there's something inside you that needed to hear. It's okay to change. It's okay to let go. It's okay to need less from others and more from yourself. We spent this time together walking gently through 6 quiet truths. Truths that many feel in their bones after 70, but rarely speak aloud. That maybe you don't need friends in the way you once did. That maybe you've outgrown certain conversations, expectations, even people. That maybe peace is worth more than presence. And that your own company, your stillness, your spirit is not a sign of loneliness, but of coming home. You've lived a lifetime filled with roles and responsibilities. You've been the caretaker, the worker, the friend, the parent, the partner. You've shown up, even when no one clapped. You've carried others, even when your own legs were tired. But now, this chapter is for you. It's not selfish. It's not cold. It's sacred. This is the part of the story where you stop trying to be everything for everyone else and start being fully, gently, honestly yourself. Letting go of old friendships doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening space. Space for deeper connection, or for no connection at all, just the joy of being. You've already proven your worth 100 times over. You've loved enough, tried enough, given enough. Now is the time to simply live. To wake up and feel the sun on your face, and not have to explain why you'd rather be alone. To spend an afternoon in silence and know that's not emptiness. That's fullness. To walk through your days not with company, but with clarity. And when you do choose to connect with others, may it be from a place of desire, not duty. From peace, not pressure. From joy, not habit. Because that's the gift of this season of life. You get to choose what stays and what softly fades away. You no longer owe anyone your time. You owe yourself your truth. And if that truth is quiet, let it be quiet. If that truth is still, let it be still. If that truth is simply a whisper that says, I am enough, even alone, then let that whisper rise and echo through your days. Because you are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not missing anything. You are exactly where your soul needs to be. And if today felt like a moment of reflection, of release, of remembering who you are, then let that be your starting point. The door has always been open. Now it's time to walk through it. Not with fear, not with apology, but with the quiet courage of someone who has lived and lost and loved, and now chooses to live again, not louder, but deeper. And if the path ahead feels quiet, good. If it feels slow, better. If it feels peaceful, you've chosen well. Because, my dear soul, you are not alone. You are accompanied by the life you've built, by the peace you've earned, and by the gentle knowing that after all these years, you've finally come home to yourself. Thank you for being here, for walking this path with me, for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. If this message stayed with you, even in a small way, then I hope it becomes a light you carry forward into all your quiet mornings and your brave afternoons. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourself, be kind to your thoughts, and above all, be at peace. You've earned it.